Hey everybody. So I really never planned on getting into this topic, as I really never thought this was an important issue. But recently the Jason A YouTube channel put out a video on the flat earth theory, and what followed concerned me a little. Jason A has been putting out great videos for a while now, but this one seems to have caused great division and I'm not sure why. In response videos and in one comment after another, I see people saying that Jason A is sold out and that they're unsubscribing, because the video he made spoke out against the flat earth theory. Now, Jason A puts out videos from a biblical perspective, so I didn't understand why Christians in particular would be unsubscribing over this topic. I can understand if he put out a video saying that Jesus isn't God or something like that, but why get upset over the flat earth theory? So this forced me to watch a few videos claiming that certain Bible verses support the flat earth theory. And after watching the most popular ones, I decided that I needed to make a video on this subject. First off, it seems that part of the issue is that people are saying that the round earth and modern cosmology points people away from God. Now, it is true that certain areas of science and even history can be proven to be leading people away from God. For example, it's very clear that the primitive evolutionary view of the ancient world is all wrong. We can know this partly from the existence of megalithic structures all over the world. Likewise, evolution itself can be proven wrong by simply understanding a bit about DNA and using a little logic. I've actually done a video on this and we'll talk about DNA a bit later. But here's the thing. As a former atheist, I've done a lot of research into cosmology, and the views within it are a bit different than these other areas. There are of course problems with the idea that the universe came from nothing, as that makes no sense, and the age of the universe is definitely in question. But besides those things, modern cosmology actually points directly at God, not away from him. And let me show you what I mean by that.
If the Bible had an account of DNA and electricity and other things that would astonish us, then, okay, our jaws drop suitably and we have to have a sensible conversation about the source of this knowledge.
You know, Dinesh D'Souza makes this claim in his new book. He's going to be, by the way, one of the much more literate and well-read and educated of our antagonists. I'm going to be debating soon. He says that in Genesis, which people used to mock, they said, let there be light, and then only a few staves later you get the sun and the moon and the stars.
Right.
How could that be? Well, that's actually, according to the Big Bang, that would be right.
Yeah, but that's
the Bang
pathetic.
precedes the galaxies.
And the point is that fiat lux, let there be light, is as consistent with the data as any other explanation.
It is precisely consistent with the data. It is a prediction, although not a quantitative prediction, that astonished the community of physicists in the 1960s, astonished Einstein in the 1920s when he realized the field equations of general relativity predicted an expanding universe. And Einstein understood right away if it's expanding, it's got to be expanding from something. And he rejected it. He didn't like the idea. He wanted a steady state universe lasting from all eternity, from one eternity to another eternity. But the Hubble data persuaded him he was wrong.
But as I understood classic Big Bang theory, and of course you and Stephen Hawking and others were instrumental in developing that idea some 3 decades or so ago.
And what you find is that the universe, if you go down into the Big Bang, backwards in time until you get into the Big Bang, you find that the geometry of that Big Bang is something extraordinarily special. Now I have to say that this is one of the big mysteries of the universe. You say the Big Bang started everything off. Well, the Big Bang, you say, well, you just give up. I mean, it's this completely chaotic state and so on. But it's not completely chaotic. It's highly organized, highly ordered. Now, this is an observational fact.
Well, how do you prove that, what you've just told me?
That it's highly ordered.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, how do you prove any of it?
It's a feature of what's known as the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics basically tells us that the universe gets more and more random as time goes on. And this, if you might say there's nothing puzzling about that, it's just things just get more and more random. But if you go back in time, what does that mean? It means things get more and more organized, more and more and more and more organized. So at the Big Bang, you had an extraordinarily organized state. And the puzzle is, why was that initial state of the universe in the conventional view so highly organized? And
well, it almost prompts the question, who?
Well, some people would put it that way, but I'd prefer to look at things in a scientific view, because there's so many ordered issues which are of a sort of mathematical nature. And again, one can even give a figure to how organized this is. If you want to say how special was that initial state? Well, suppose I say that the degree of specialness can be measured by 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 10. There's so many numbers. 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. How many zeros is that? Well, the number of zeros would have to be at least 10 to the power 123. That's an absolutely ridiculously huge number. Now, how did the universe start off in such an extraordinary special state? Now, none of the theories that I've seen that have been put forward explain that.
Leonard, what is it about the fine-tuning of this universe that causes such energy, such controversy among scientists, philosophers, theologians? Everyone today is talking about fine-tuning. Why?
Well, it seems, and we don't completely understand why, that the laws of physics, laws of cosmology, laws of how the universe evolved, seem to be very special. Of course they're special. Everybody would expect them to be special, but they're special in a way that's unexpected. They seem to be special in the way that is just very, very conducive to our own existence. Now, almost everything, if you changed it very much, the electric charge of the electron, the mass of this or that particle, various constants of nature, how strong gravity is, if you changed it by a few percent, 10%, some of them 20%, some of them 30%, you would really be in trouble.
Okay, we have fine-tuning. We've got to deal with it. Now, there are a number of ways that we can explain that. I mean, it cries out for explanation.
Yes.
We cannot say, oh, yes, fine, and let's go on. We have to explain it one way or another.
Basically, there are 3 explanations.
Okay, number 1.
Okay, God.
Number 2. that one I understand.
Right. Accident.
Okay,
right,
that
the
strains credulity just
right.
by on its face value.
Right.
So it's an
Right.
accident just that way, and it happens to work out perfectly.
Right. 123 decimal places, 0, not likely to be an accident. Well, there's a 4th way.
Oh, 3rd.
I didn't.
You want to,
let me put the 4th way in before I get to the 3rd.
Yeah.
The 4th way is, who knows? Maybe someday somebody will figure it out.
Oh, sure. There is one ultimate
Right.
solution. All of
Right.
these constants of
Right.
nature can be devolved
Maybe
down to
somebody will
to a
figure it out in the
fundamental
future.
equation that
Some
will
fundamental
express
equation.
all of these
Right.
as derived
But
functions.
that would partly fall into the category of accident. The last way, which physicists don't like, they don't like it because it runs against their ambitions. The ambition was to explain every constant, every number, to understand everything about the universe. The other way goes as follows. The universe is enormously big. We know that, incidentally. And when I say enormously big, I don't mean like we used to think 10 billion light years. Right. I mean 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the 10th. We have no idea how big it is. Enormously big. We suspect that it is very much bigger than the region we can see. We also have reason to believe that it's diverse. For those of us who believe in this particular picture of a tremendously diverse, some people call it a multiverse.
The anthropic fine-tuning, all this exquisite fine-tuning. And one of the counter-arguments to that is the idea that there were billions and billions and billions of other universes out there, these various physical models that generate what's called the multiverse. And you talk in your book a bit about the multiverse, and what's your assessment of that as a contrary hypothesis?
Well, you need a special scale to rank the multiverse, the scale of the preposterous. If the doctrine that we all have parents who are ducks comes in at 100, the multiverse comes in at slightly more. It is one of those strange phenomena in the history of thought. I mean, you see the most intelligent people on the planet, and that's sincerely meant. These guys who are doing quantum cosmology.
They're smart.
Very smart, very smart. Nonetheless, like a herd of individuals, they all are instinctively moving toward the same conclusion, which involves embracing any doctrine, hypothesis, or belief other than the most obvious one.
So if you followed these clips, if scientists really wanted to lead people away from God, then they should have stuck with the idea that the universe never had a beginning, which is what they used to think. Even Nobel Prize winners like Arno Penzias, who co-discovered the cosmic microwave background radiation, which helped establish the Big Bang theory of cosmology, is quoted in saying that the best data we have are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, the Bible as a whole. Also, seeing that the other theories, like the multiverse, make no sense to explain the fine-tuning or the existence of the universe, then the only thing that physicists are left with as an explanation is God. In fact, current research has even led scientists to conclude that the universe shouldn't actually exist based on the scientific regularities. As the universe does exist, then what's actually required is a breaking of the scientific regularities, and that's what's called a miracle. So, despite what some may say, modern cosmology does not lead people away from God. Now, in getting back to the flat earth theory, if we're going to figure out what the Bible really says about the theory, we first have to understand that verses in the Bible depend heavily on the context of the passage, and even the context of the entire Bible. I think the Bible should be taken as literal as possible, but that level will depend on the context. Let me show you what I mean.
Jesus said, I am the door. What was he made of? Stone, metal, plastic? That's a metaphor. You see, the word literal is something we need to investigate. We use it without thinking. People constantly ask me, do you take the Bible literally? I say, what exactly do you mean? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's talking about the literal earth, base level, isn't it? And of course, the way we read language is, first of all, to take it at face value, but the face value may not be literalistic. Let me explain that to you. Jesus said, I am the door. How do you know he's not a door made of steel? Actually, it's because you know a bit of science. You know something about the real world. You know that's a metaphor, but watch it. That doesn't mean it isn't real. And it doesn't mean it isn't literal. Jesus is a real door. Literal if you like, but at the next level up. That is, he is a real doorway into a real experience of God. I'd stake my life on that. Do you see the point I'm making? That this word literal is totally misleading. You know, sometimes when people say to me, do you take the Bible literally? I say to them, Israel was a land flowing with milk and honey. So when the Israelites came into the land, they met a great sticky ball of milk and honey coming crashing down the main street. Oh, no, you don't take it literally. You take it spiritually, don't you? Israel was a land full of the milk of the Word and the honey of the Holy Spirit. You don't take it like that either. Israel was a land, literal. The milk and honey were literal. The metaphor is flowing. But it's describing a real situation, that this was a rich culture, agriculture, with lots of milk, lots of honey, lots of health. Do you see the point?
So now let's break down what the Bible really says. First off, when looking at the verses these flat earth videos provided, I noticed a couple things. I noticed that they often only provide a partial verse, and often don't take in context what was said before or after that partial verse. I also noticed that they have a tendency to put a large amount of video time between verses that actually conflict with each other, as if to hide problems with the flat earth theory. For example, the corners, Revelation 7:1. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth. Now often the point is made that a sphere has no corners, and that's why it's a flat earth. But in comparison with the verse in Isaiah that talks about the circle of the earth, you'll notice that even if you take this verse as meaning a flat circular disc and not a sphere, a flat disc also does not have corners. This is a huge problem with the flat earth theory. Now a bit later I will show how this problem can easily be reconciled, but let's dig a bit more into Isaiah. So here's the problem with thinking that Isaiah is just talking about a mathematical circle.
Isaiah 40, verse 22. It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. The flat earthers will say, hey, the Bible says the earth is a circle. It doesn't say it's a sphere. I point out that I taught geometry for 15 years, and there is no such thing as a circle. A circle is a purely imaginary concept used for mathematics. If the circle has any depth at all, it's now no longer a circle, it's a cylinder. And I can dig a hole in the yard and show you the earth has some depth to it. Okay? So it is not a circle. It's just talking about, I think, any of the circles. You can stand any place and get an infinite number of circles around the earth from any place you stand.
So there's this point. But also if you go into the other verses using this Hebrew word in the Bible, you'll find that this word is also used to describe the vault in the heavens that the flat earth theory thinks of as a literal glass dome over the disk. Now the problem with this is that a glass dome is a three-dimensional object, basically like half of a sphere. So if you now apply that to the same word in Isaiah, then it's actually pointing to the idea that the earth is a three-dimensional circular sphere and not a flat disk. Moving on from this, let's talk about the idea in the flat earth theory that the earth is fixed and not moving. Often what is quoted are verses saying, "The world also shall be established, that it shall not be moved. The world also is established, that it cannot be moved." Seems like the earth can't move at all, right? Well, let's look at some more Psalms. Psalm 16:8. "I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved." Psalm 21:7. "For the king trusteth in the Lord, and through the mercy of the Most High he shall not be moved." Psalm 62:6. "He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved." So if we apply the same literal level here, then you'd have to say that this means that these psalm writers literally have been paralyzed and glued to the earth so that they also can't move. So is that what it really means when it says the earth shall not be moved? Or is it really talking more about God's authority over it?
Jesus said, "I am the door." What was he made of? Stone, metal, plastic?
Let's also talk about the pillars in the flat earth theory. So what they'll usually quote is passages like 1 Samuel 2:8 saying, "For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them." Really? So this is the entire verse. "He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set them among princes, and make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them." Seems like this might actually be painting a picture of the meek inheriting the earth, not actual stone pillars. Let's also go to Revelation 3:12, which says, "He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write on him my new name." So is God literally going to turn people into stone pillars in heaven? Or is it possible that the pillars of the earth represent something else?
Jesus said, "I am the door." What was he made of? Stone, metal, plastic?
One of the funniest parts of the Bible flat earth theory has to be the idea of the footstool. That basically the Bible makes the point that the earth is called a footstool and so it must be shaped like this. I noticed that each video made mention of this and quoted verses saying, "Thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you will build me, and where is the place of my rest?" To get the proper interpretation, what does Jesus say about God? He says that God is an eternal spirit at the foundational level. So obviously God doesn't need a throne and a footstool to take a rest on after a long day, and I'm pretty sure Jesus hasn't made himself legs that stretch all the way down to earth. But even if you wanted to say that earth was shaped like a literal footstool, then hey, guess what? If the earth is a footstool, then I guess it must have rolling wheels, right? Or I guess the earth is made out of fabric and beans, right? Come on guys. I could take this last picture and say that the earth is a sphere, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to instead say that the image of a footstool is showing God's authority over the heavens and the earth, and shows them in the same light as something that people with authority can kick to the curb if they want to. It's not referring to the actual shape of the earth.
Jesus said, "I am the door." What was he made of? Stone, metal, plastic?
The flat earth theory also points to the passage of Jesus and Satan, which says, "And the devil, taking him up into an high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time." From here people try to make the point that you need a flat plane to be able to see all the earth at the same time and not a sphere. Well, if you think you can go to the top of Mount Everest and see what's going on in all the kingdoms of the world, you're kidding yourself. You probably see a lot of clouds, snow, and other mountains, So what's probably going on here is that Satan is simply flexing his muscles, so to speak, by trying to put on this display with Jesus, maybe showing him the kingdoms of the world in some kind of mental projection. It's obviously not talking about a flat earth, though. Let's also talk about the grasshoppers in the Isaiah verse. Some videos say if you're completely outside the universe, then the people wouldn't resemble grasshoppers, because the universe itself would resemble a speck. So that means that God must be sitting on this glass dome looking down at people that now resemble grasshoppers. Well, let's think about this. What do you think people would look like from a dome that's beyond the sun? How far away do you think the sun is? A couple miles? Do you think you can even see a person from a couple miles away? See how silly this is? No, what's being talked about here in this particular passage is how God is supreme over the earth and all its inhabitants. Now, the Bible does constantly refer to this looking glass that seemingly separates God from our reality. But in order to understand this, then we need to understand how God has formed this reality. By doing this, we can actually see that the earth is both round and flat at the exact same time. So, in the Bible, you'll see verses saying things like, "All the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled up like a scroll. All their hosts shall fall down, as the leaf falls from the vine, and as the fruit falling from a fig tree." And, "Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them." See how the universe and everything in it is being referred to as being inside a scroll or a book? Well, the reality is that what is happening here is that God is showing that we live in a lower dimensional reality. Let me explain by using a clip from my last video. Take these rocks as another example. You see this stack lying by a riverbed, and everybody without question will know that this is by design. Why? It's because rocks don't put themselves together in such a sequence. Now shrink this example down to the size of atoms and the same applies. Our very atoms must be sequenced, encoded, which is what I've been talking about since the video I did on the concept of reality being a sort of matrix. By what's around us, it's clear that we live in an encoded, created reality, and such realities require programmers. So whether you use the concept of atoms being sequenced and coded, or the reality that DNA is a code, what you find is that we live in this encoded, created reality written by God. In fact, when God brought the world into being, He didn't use materials. He simply created the materials by speaking them into existence, by literally giving them a command, like you would to a computer. So in thinking of this reality like this, then the truth can be easily understood. The looking glass is the dimensional separation our reality has from the larger reality outside it, and the flat earth is the view someone would have if you viewed it from a higher dimension. By viewing things in multiple dimensions, then things can go from this to this. Likewise, the earth can be an actual sphere while also being flat and having corners, if you look at it from an outside dimension. Remember how God rolls up the heavens like a scroll? Although I would also add the possibility that the corners might more accurately be translated as quarters, and so God would basically be sectioning off this blueprint design. So the reality is much deeper than people are making it out to be, which we should expect. People might think that the idea that the earth going around the sun is wrong, saying that this doesn't fit with the Bible, but think about the metaphors God uses. You need the sun to live. You need the light to live. If God set up the universe, then the sun would actually be a metaphor for the Son of God, and the earth revolves around the Son of God. Let that sink in for a moment. Revelation 21:23. The city had no need of sun or of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it. The Lamb is its light. Satan would be the one to blind people to the metaphor and get them to worship the literal sun in the solar system, which he has done in the past. It also seems that he's created this flat earth theory to cause great division in the world. I noticed in the 2 Bible verse videos I watched, one guy says at about 14 minutes in that, if you don't think it matters if the earth is round or flat, then you are a self-confessed idiot. Not a very Christian thing to say, and that person should probably read Matthew 5:22. The other video I watched stated twice that nothing would turn people to God faster than people learning the truth about the flat earth. Really? If that's true, why don't I remember Jesus talking about the flat earth or the apostles preaching the flat earth? Seems to me that Paul only preached on the importance of the crucifixion. So it seems like this all might be a satanic deception, and Christians should really know better than to say things like what is being said in these videos. Interesting side note, it seems that this deception has been subliminally programmed into our brains, like past world events have been. I've seen a number of examples of this, but here's a clear one. Remember that Simpsons movie a few years back where a negative entity forced this flat earth model onto the people? So who really came up with this flat earth theory? In fact, the flat earth theory would be something that points people away from the Bible, because past civilizations also believed in the flat earth theory. So if you want the flat earth theory, then you can also turn to a bunch of pagan materials. Does this really lead people to the true God by taking away the Bible's uniqueness and giving them more false options? No, and this is why people need to read the Bible for themselves, read it in context, and pray for understanding when reading it. If you don't, it's easy to get sucked into a deception. Heaven and earth will pass away, but the Word is eternal, and that Word is Jesus. So keep your focus on Jesus and what He has to say. And remember, the way of the truth means life, and we need to listen when the truth speaks.